Very few of us in the West understand. Well, I think the word crazy. Well, I think the word crazy is word crazy. Word crazy. Word crazy. Word 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 crazy. Word 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 crazy is a good adjective to attach to this particular event. Very few of us in the West understand Russia or Russians. And as a result, we reach all sorts of erroneous conclusions about what is or is not happening. This is one of those events that I'm afraid has to be viewed through a different lens. Prigozhin is an individual, that, as you know, that is very flamboyant, very outspoken. He's had lots of good adjective to attach to this particular event. Very few of us in the West understand Russia or Russians. And as a result, we reach all sorts of erroneous conclusions about what is or is not happening. This is one of those events that I'm afraid has to be viewed through a different lens. Prigozhin is an individual, as you know, that is very flamboyant, very outspoken. He's had lots of opportunities to say good things. He's also said some stupid things. And he's been viewed widely inside the senior ranks of the Russian army as a double-edged sword. Obviously, Wagner has done a brilliant job. And Wagner is viewed inside Russia in much the same way that the French Foreign Legion is viewed inside France. Wagner is not seen as a mercenary organization at all. Certainly they have foreigners in their ranks, and yes, they have convicted criminals that on certain conditions are allowed to serve. But on the whole, they're seen as fiercely loyal to the Russian state, and they are. And just like the French Foreign Legion, they fight extremely well. And no one in France will ever criticize the French Foreign Legion. And I think you have a similar situation in Russia right now. The Wagner Group is extraordinarily popular. So is Prigozhin. Lots of Russians look to him for inspiration. He is seen as someone who wants to wage unrelenting war with the Ukrainian state. He wants this man Zelensky gone. He and his fighters are seen as part of this determined Russian effort to destroy this enemy force in Ukraine. So everything that happens has to be understood against that backdrop. Secondly, Prigozhin of late has had some serious problems with the Russian high command. There are legal issues involved with the Wagner Group. Originally, it was designed exclusively for use overseas, and obviously it's being used domestically. And over time, the military has expressed an interest on some of the very senior ranks, particularly the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff, in breaking this Wagner organization up, which is something that Mr. Prigozhin didn't want to do. Secondly, Prigozhin has been, I think, unreasonably hostile on occasion towards the high command. On the other hand, some of his criticism is widely shared inside Russia. Criticism is that he's not only not being adequately supplied, which is open to debate, but also that this war is not being prosecuted with the level of ferocity that it deserves. He doesn't even like the use of the words special military operation. He wants a declared war. He wants the nation mobilized. Now, Putin knows it, and they've known each other for some time. I'm reluctant to use the word quote-unquote coup, because I don't think Prigozhin ever set out to displace Putin. I think he was trying to get Putin's attention. I think he went too far. And you had the potential for real bloodshed with this small force of 3,000 or 4,000 that was going to Moscow. But I think the hope was that he could somehow not reach Putin's ears, get him to understand that his senior leaders are not what they should be. Whether or not that's true, that's a different issue. But I think that was Prigozhin's principal goal. I don't think he saw himself as rising to the top of the wall.
So I think a lot of the Wagner troops that went with him said, what we're doing is we're going to rescue this man Putin from his generals. We're going to get him to understand what's really happening. Now, there are others that will dispute that. I think Mercuris and his friends, who do a wonderful job, by the way, of reporting, don't share that. But my sources see things differently, and so do I. Now, it's all over. And there are a couple of things that are very important to understand. Putin is not Stalin. Russia is not the Soviet Union. If anything, Putin is much closer to Islam than he is to anything else. And he had the opportunity to arrest Prigozhin and the rest of these troops and execute them. And he very quickly decided not to do so. First of all, because of the reasons I cited at the outset, he realizes these men are Russian patriots. They have fought very, very hard for Russia. Secondly, he's not really threatened because he had 30,000 troops in Moscow. He's got control. Nobody joined this. No one was interested in supporting this. So he's not really threatened. And Lukashenko has known Prigozhin for at least 20 years. All three men know each other. I think Lukashenko said, look, let me pick this man up, bring him to Russia, we'll keep him under wraps. And Putin
decided that he could be lenient. I don't think this reflects his weakness. I think it speaks a lot to his strength.
So this is now over. The real question is, what's the message received? Does Putin understand? He really does. Does he now understand that the Russian people
People want an end to this war? Does he understand that the Russian military, its army sitting in Ukraine, wants to attack and
end this? There's something else lurking in the background that viewers need to keep in mind, and I think it's also on productions, though I can't prove it. Zelensky has spoken several times about attacking
the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That's a very dangerous thing.
because it could
Conceivably radiate.
and cause terrible destruction. Thanks to radiation if one of those reactors was destroyed. Zelensky has been pushing it. The Donald who works for him and runs the
Intelligence side of the house in Ukraine has been actively advocating for it. From the very beginning,
there's been a
concern in Moscow about
potential bomb.
and that this dirty bomb
Implemented by the Ukrainians,
obviously with the
nuclear power plant,
could
be then presented
as a full swag.
because ultimately people in Washington, President, people like Graham and Blumenthal just sponsored this legislation, which would trigger an automatic war with Russia under such circumstances. I think there's a fear that this is quite real, and once again, the longer they wait to act decisively, the more likely something like this is to happen, and then you really do have a wider war, which no one in the right mind wants right now. So I think all of these things were whirling around in Prigozhin's head. I think they were on the minds of several senior military officers. So now he's gone. He'll go to Russia. Some of these soldiers will simply be released. They won't go back to fight, but the majority of the Wagner group will. How they will be employed, where they will be employed, I don't know. But they're too good to dismiss. Let's face it. So it's over. Let's see if there's a shakeup in the high command. Let's see how long it takes to unleash this offensive.
What do you think about the mainstream news coverage of this series of events, and why has the war dragged out like this?
I think
News coverage of this series of events, and why has the war dragged out? News coverage of this series of
let's see how long it takes to unleash this offensive. Let's see how long it takes to unleash this offensive. Let's see how long it takes to unleash this offensive.
What do you think about the mainstream news coverage of this series of events, and why has the war dragged out like this?
I think two reasons. First of all, from the very beginning, President Putin was very reluctant to confront the West militarily. He still is. And I think he went into Ukraine with unrealistic expectations, the wrong assumptions. He thought, well, if I go in, I show I'm serious, but I don't do too much, then the West will negotiate. Well, it took several months for him to figure out no one's not going to negotiate anything. They viewed what he did as evidence for weakness. So he had to essentially call a timeout, reorganize, reorient, and he listened to the senior leadership that said, we don't have enough troops to do what we need to do. So now you have almost 750,000 troops involved, and there are talks behind the scenes about continuing the mobilization and adding another 300,000 or 400,000 men. Because increasingly Putin is concluding he's not going to find anyone to talk to, and he will ultimately have to march to the Polish border, which is not what he wants to do. He's well aware that the real Ukrainians who live west of the river want nothing to do with Russians. He's not a fool. So I think what he'll do now is take the rest of eastern Ukraine, then he'll move down to Odessa, then there will be another pause. But I think he's watching us. He talked about the United States. Someone told me this morning that since we changed the debt ceiling, we've added $700 billion in debt to our already staggering size of our debt, trillions of dollars. I mean, this is crazy. I think he looks at that and says, how much longer can this go on? He sees Donald Trump, he sees RFK Jr. They are forcefully opposed to war with Russia, as they should be. He looks at Germany, which is now in free fall into a terrible economic recession that could easily become a depression. He sees their scientific industrial base collapsing, and he says, how much longer can this man Schultz last? I don't know what the story is with Macron, but I don't see him as a particularly strong figure domestically in France. And then, of course, we have London, the Sunak, who turned out to be pretty much like his predecessors, and I'm not sure the British people really want to go to war with Russia. So you put it all together, and I think he says, I'm going to press ahead, but I'm going to do so deliberately. I'm not going to just say, all right, tomorrow morning we're marching on Lvov, and we'll be at the Polish border in 10 days. That's not his style. He's going to do what I said, and then I think, look for applause and look for some sanity in Europe, because the Europeans are the only ones that can step in. This government that we have is divorced from reality on every level, economically, financially, politically, culturally, strategically, militarily.
I want to talk a little bit more about our country's economics, and I'm glad you brought up the debt. Turning to this sort of global financial system that appears to be crumbling, do you see our national debt as a national security threat?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. This is what's really disturbing most of all. If you recognize that it's only a matter of time until your own financial system falls apart here at home, and potentially that we slide into a very serious recession, is not a deep depression, which is by no means out of balance right now for us. You understand
things that you've got to do if you're going to get your creditors to cooperate with you is demonstrate your willingness to tighten the purse strings, to cut spending, to cut back. What is this administration doing? It's almost as though you're on a roller coaster. It's no longer connected to the track. You're about to go over a giant hump, and nothing is going to save you. So you've got to go back to the basics and understand, Franklin Roosevelt in 32 and again in 34 effectively defaulted. What he did is he said, I've got to restructure the debt. Well, at the time, we had huge quantities of gold pouring into us from the Europeans who owed us from World War I. That helped a great deal. Secondly, he had a big scientific industrial base that simply needed to be restarted. We need to get people back into it to work. But he also cut spending in a number of important ways, not the least of which was in defense. And he understood that you had to do that to get your creditors to support you. Why would anybody turn to us and say, all right, why would Saudi Arabia, Japan, China, any number of our creditors say, well, these Americans aren't so bad. They're really serious. They want to deal with the debt. There's no evidence for it.
What is your take on the implications of the U.S. going from the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation, and the fact that we've been able to sort of exploit our advantage by being the global reserve currency, and we're seeing nations start to de-dollarize faster and faster?
Well, as you know, the nations, the BRICS, I think there's a total of 84 right now interested in working with Russia, China, and India to effectively get out from underneath our financial system. Remember, the problem with our financial system, not the dollar per se, it's our desire to bully everyone. We have 34 nations, last time I looked, under some form of financial sanction. This is crazy. How can you expect to do business when you're telling people, no, we're punishing you for these political reasons, we don't like your human rights record, we don't like this or that. More important, perhaps you're not growing the right crop, the crop we want you to grow. All of this is outrageous nonsense. People have had it. It's over. They put up with this for the first 50 years after the Second World War for obvious reasons. They did not want to be dominated by communism. They saw the danger that represented themselves. But this is over. That no longer justifies this unquestioning obedience. Only the Europeans are following us slavishly, and I think that's because the globalist elite doesn't know what else to do. And remember, what's no one in Washington want to admit? I was wrong. No one will step forward and say, gosh, we made a mistake. So it's all going to collapse that way. It's going to fall apart. It will disintegrate. Somebody asked me yesterday, how far do you think we're going to get? Are we going to change things with the next election? I don't know if we'll make it that far. It's hard for me to believe that this man Biden is going to make it through the rest of the year. And he's obviously a cardboard cutout. Other people are handing him the script to read. But he's at the end of his tether. So what do you do, put Kamala Harris in? Well, good luck with that proposition. I don't know if anybody believes that woman knows what she's doing. So then suddenly you have a power battle. I think it's going to take something like this before finally someone says, well, what do you do right away that's going to improve our position financially? You cut defense spending because you're dismantling the empire. You've got to dismantle the empire. That's what the Romans did when they fell apart. As you move from Diocletian to the end, bring the troops back. Bring them back from England. Bring them back from Gaul. Bring them back from North Africa until finally they were home and everything changed. So I think something like that's going to happen here.
Colonel, something that's always amazed me is how far we're able to kick the can down the road. The U.S. dollar is still used in about 80% of global transactions. We're so deeply entrenched in this financial system that we helped prop up, and now it's basically built on a foundation of debt. So you mentioned that you think it's going to crumble pretty soon, but how do you actually see it playing out? Because I think a lot of people would argue that it's probably going to be the U.S. dollar dominating for a bit longer as other currencies start to rise, including many of us believe Bitcoin.
Well, remember,
de meeste mensen denken dat ze heel
currency of some kind, or a basket of currencies. I don't know what they'll come up with. It takes time to build the institutions like ours. Now, we can argue that the SWIFT system is anachronistic, needs to be overhauled and changed. I agree. But you don't build something like that overnight. And confidence in these countries and the ability to do business with them legitimately, that also has to grow. So the dollar is going to persist a bit longer, but as the dollar ceases to be the one and best alternative, that's when Bitcoin steps in. Because again, what's the problem with the dollar right now? The banks. People don't want to be under the thumb of the banks because the banks are controlled by the same globalist elite that runs the media, that that gives you the news that isn't news, that creates false narratives, that dominates your government, etc. These are the same people that shipped all of our jobs overseas and that deindustrialized America. These are the people that Donald Trump was opposed to and fights against. These are the people that RFK Jr. talks about. That's why Bitcoin is inevitable in my judgment. When, how, and how much, that's beyond my level of expertise, but I see that it is inevitable. What else can you do? Do you want to use whatever comes out of the BRICS, China, Russia, and India? Probably not immediately.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, you mentioned even if it's a basket of currencies backed by gold, how do you audit the gold? All the gold has been centralized in the vaults of central banks. None of these nations trust one another. And with Bitcoin, it's this immutable trust network and something that anyone can verify from anywhere. So I think that it'll be interesting to see this play out. But I'm kind of curious, you have so much experience deep within the military. Sometimes on this show, we talk about the military-industrial complex and how that has eroded some of the economic value that the U.S. offers. Can you talk a little bit about the America that you grew up in? Can you describe it versus the America that you see today that kids are growing up in?
Fairly modest neighborhood, lower middle class neighborhood, frankly, mostly working class people in North Philadelphia. Most of our neighbors at the time were Ukrainians, Poles, some Lithuanians, a few Irish and Italians thrown into the mix, but